Commander Aiden Cross opened his eyes to an alien sky, gasping for air that was thin and sharp. His body ached from the sudden drop, dumped unceremoniously from a Galactic Council pod onto a desolate planet. The Council's message was clear. Humanity was advancing too rapidly, a threat to the delicate order of galactic power. Aiden had been their example, a soldier chosen to be exiled, erased, and forgotten. The ground beneath him was cold and jagged, a barren wasteland as far as his eyes could see, stripped of his gear except for the worn survival suit on his back. Aiden knew this was no ordinary mission. The Council didn't care if he lived or died. They just wanted him gone. But if the Council thought he would simply roll over and perish, they had seriously underestimated him. Aiden stood up slowly, scanning the horizon for signs of life. Survive. Assess. Adapt. His military instincts kicked in, guiding his every move. The air was breathable, but hostile, the mix of dry winds and dust storms brewing in the distance. With nothing but jagged cliffs and an orange-hued sky around him, it felt like a tomb. But Aiden knew better. There was always something lurking, waiting. Suddenly, he heard a sound, soft, alien, and musical, like wind chimes in a breeze. A silhouette appeared over a ridge ahead. Aiden's heart quickened as he crouched low, squinting at the figures now coming into view. 5 figures, all female, and most surprisingly, not hostile. Their appearance was mesmerizing, iridescent skin that shimmered like moonlight, long silver hair cascading down their backs, and eyes that glowed faintly in the twilight. They moved with grace, but there was a wariness to their steps, a sense of exhaustion beneath their beauty. Aiden's mind raced. These aliens weren't the monsters he had expected. They were stranded, just like him. The leader of the group stepped forward cautiously, her eyes locked on Aiden. She carried a small cylindrical device strapped to her belt, scanning the environment nervously. When she spoke, it was in a language he couldn't understand, soft, melodic, yet edged with caution. Aiden raised his hands in a gesture of peace, careful not to alarm them. His throat was dry, and he wondered if he was hallucinating. But no, this was real. He was not alone on this planet after all. Aiden stayed perfectly still, his hands raised, watching the alien leader closely. The other 4 females gathered behind her, whispering among themselves in their strange, melodic language. There was hesitation in their eyes, mistrust mingled with cautious hope. The leader tilted her head, studying Aiden for a moment before holding up the cylindrical device she carried. It emitted a soft hum, and then her next words, though slow and heavily accented, were suddenly comprehensible. "Who are you?" she asked, her gaze unwavering. Aiden kept his voice calm and low, resisting the urge to reach for the knife hidden in his boot. "My name is Aiden Cross. I'm human, from Earth. The Galactic Council sent me here to die." The alien woman's expression flickered with something Aiden couldn't place. Shock, perhaps, disgust. Then her mouth set in a grim line, and she gave a slight nod. "I am Kyra," she said. "We are not here by choice either." Aiden frowned, lowering his hand slowly. "You were stranded." "Yes," Kyra confirmed, glancing over her shoulder at the others. "We were part of a research expedition. Our ship malfunctioned and crashed here many cycles ago. We've been trying to survive ever since." The pieces started falling into place for Aiden. The Galactic Council hadn't just exiled him to a barren wasteland. They had chosen a planet already home to stranded aliens. He couldn't tell if this was an oversight or a deliberate act of cruelty. Either way, he was in the middle of something much bigger than he had anticipated. "Do you have a way off this planet?" Aiden asked, hopeful but wary. Kyra's shoulders sagged. "No. The ship was destroyed beyond repair. We've scavenged what we could, but our supplies are running low." Aiden took a deep breath, his mind working fast. Survive. Assess. Adapt. He had no idea how long he could last on this forsaken world, but the first rule of survival was clear: find allies or die alone. I can help, Aiden offered. I have training in survival, tactics, combat, if needed. We can work together. Kara raised an eyebrow. And why would you help us, human? Aiden smirked, though there was little humor in it. Because I don't want to die here any more than you do. For a long moment, Kara studied him, as if weighing the risk of trusting an outsider. Then, finally, she nodded. Very well. We will take you to our camp. The group set off across the rocky landscape, Aiden trailing slightly behind Kyra as they descended into a shallow canyon. The 4 other women, silent but watchful, flanked him from both sides, their presence making him uneasy. He could feel their eyes on him, studying his every move, searching for any hint of danger. They walked for what felt like hours, navigating through narrow paths and jagged cliffs. The camp was tucked away in a small valley, sheltered from the worst of the windstorms. A series of makeshift shelters, constructed from fragments of their crashed ship, stood huddled together, offering little more than minimal protection from the elements. Welcome, Kira said, gesturing toward the modest encampment. It's not much, but it's kept us alive. Aiden nodded, already taking mental notes on how to fortify the camp. The perimeter was weak, leaving them vulnerable to an ambush. The shelters were barely standing, and there was no sign of a water source nearby. If they wanted to survive for any length of time, they would need to make some serious improvements. As if reading his thoughts, Kira motioned toward a pile of broken equipment in the corner of the camp. We've salvaged what we could from the wreck, but it's not enough. We are engineers and scientists, not soldiers. Aiden crouched by the equipment, inspecting the twisted metal and shattered components. I can work with this, he muttered, more to himself than to Kyra. But we'll need more supplies, tools, weapons, if possible. Kyra folded her arms. There are dangers here, Aiden Cross, creatures that hunt in the night. We cannot venture far without risking our lives. Then we'll have to outsmart them, Aiden said with a determined glint in his eye. We'll set traps, build defenses. We'll make this place more than just a camp. We'll make it a fortress. Kyra gave a slow, approving nod. If you can do that, perhaps we stand a chance. As night fell, Aiden worked tirelessly, using the limited resources at hand to reinforce the shelters and set up makeshift barriers around the camp. Kira and the others watched in silence, occasionally lending a hand when he needed it. Despite their initial wariness, the aliens seemed genuinely curious about the human soldier in their midst. One of the women, a quiet engineer named Zara, knelt beside Aiden as he rigged a primitive alarm system from scraps of metal and wire. Your kind, you are resilient, she remarked softly. You adapt quickly. Aiden shrugged, his hands never stopping. You learn to be quick when the universe wants you dead. Zara tilted her head, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. Perhaps that is why the Council fears you. The words struck a chord in Aiden. Fear. That was the heart of it, wasn't it? The Council feared humanity's potential, their relentless drive to survive, to overcome any obstacle, and in their fear, they had tried to snuff out that potential by casting him aside. But they had failed. He glanced up at Zara, meeting her gaze. They should be afraid. Zara smiled, a glimmer of hope in her alien eyes. Perhaps, together, we can show them why. The first night on the alien planet tested Aiden and his new companions. As darkness enveloped the camp, bone-chilling wind swept through the valley. The distant howls of unseen predators echoed across the jagged cliffs, a haunting reminder of the dangers lurking beyond the fragile barriers they had constructed. Aiden sat close to the fire, the flickering flames casting long shadows on the weathered faces around him. Kyra crouched beside him, her silver hair glowing softly in the firelight. They will come, she warned in a hushed tone. They always do. Night on this planet belongs to them. Hayden tightened his grip on the crude spear he had fashioned from broken metal rods. He had heard enough stories in his military days to know that predators hunted not just for food, but for dominance. "Then we'll be ready," he said calmly, scanning the camp's perimeter one last time. Zara joined them by the fire, carrying a small device in her hand. A rusted transmitter scavenged from their crashed ship. "This won't send a signal off-world," she admitted, her voice heavy with frustration, "but it could detect movement within a short radius. If something crosses our perimeter, we'll know." "Good," Aiden replied, admiring her ingenuity. "If we can't fight them head-on, we'll outsmart them." As the first hours of night passed in tense silence, the camp lay still except for the occasional crackling of the fire. The air felt heavier, as if the darkness itself carried weight. Hayden remained alert, eyes darting between the jagged rocks that formed the natural walls of the canyon. Then, without warning, the alarm system Zara had rigged let out a soft ping. Kyra shot to her feet. "They're here." Hayden gripped his spear and motioned for the others to take position behind the shelters. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "We let them come to us." The sound of claws scraping against stone grew louder, accompanied by low growls that reverberated through the canyon walls. Aiden's pulse quickened as the first shadow emerged from the darkness. A massive feline-like creature with sleek black fur and glowing red eyes. Its movements were slow, deliberate, as if savoring the fear it instilled. Behind it, more shapes slinked forward, 6 in total. They were lean and muscular, each predator as deadly as the next. Aiden could see the intelligence in their predatory gaze. These creatures were not mindless beasts. They were hunters, and tonight, the camp was their prey. Zara clutched her tool belt tightly, her breathing shallow. "We can't fight them all." Aiden's mind raced. A head-on confrontation would be suicide, but he had no intention of dying here. Survive. Assess. Adapt. "Kyra," Aiden whispered urgently, "can these things see well in the dark?" Kyra shook her head. "No, they hunt by sound and heat. Their vision is poor." Aiden grinned. "Perfect." He reached into the fire and pulled out a burning piece of wood, careful not to burn his hands. Then he motioned to Zara. "You, me, and Kara will lure them into the traps we set earlier. Once they're inside the kill zone, we light them up. The others stay hidden until we signal." Kara hesitated, but Aiden's steady gaze gave her the confidence she needed. With a quick nod, she grabbed another torch from the fire. Zara followed suit, her hands trembling slightly but determined. Aiden glanced at the others. "Stay low and keep quiet. We'll only get one shot at this." The trio slipped into the shadows, moving silently along the narrow path toward the creatures. Aiden's pulse pounded in his ears, but his mind was clear, his focus absolute. They had to make it to the kill zone, 2 large trenches lined with sharpened spikes, without alerting the beasts. As they neared the traps, one of the creatures suddenly sniffed the air, turning its glowing eyes toward them. Aiden froze. The beast growled, muscles coiling, preparing to pounce. "Now!" Aiden shouted. Kyra and Zara hurled their torches at the creatures, and the dry ground erupted in flames. The sudden burst of light blinded the beasts, sending them into a frenzy. They thrashed and roared, disoriented and enraged, but Aiden was already in motion. He sprinted toward the trenches, shouting to draw the creatures' attention. "Over here, you bastards!" The largest of the pack lunged after him, claws scraping against stone as it gave chase. Aiden pushed his legs harder, the adrenaline driving him forward. Just as the beasts closed in, Aiden leaped across the trench, and the creature followed. With a sickening crunch, the beast impaled itself on the sharpened spikes below. It let out a blood-curdling scream before going still, its glowing eyes dimming to black. The remaining creatures hesitated, confused by the sudden loss of their leader. Aiden seized the opportunity. "Kyra, now!" Kyra kicked over a pile of rocks, sending them tumbling into the second trench, blocking the creature's only escape route. Trapped between the walls of the canyon and the spiked trenches, the beasts had nowhere to run. Zara pulled out a small explosive device from her belt, one of the few intact pieces of technology they had salvaged, and tossed it into the pit. "Cover your ears." The blast was deafening, and when the dust settled, the beasts lay motionless at the bottom of the trench. Aiden wiped the sweat from his brow, breathing heavily. "Well," he muttered, "that wasn't so bad." Kyra gave him a look that was half exasperation, half admiration. "You humans, you truly are insane." Aiden chuckled. "You'll get used to it." With the immediate threat neutralized, the camp returned to an uneasy calm. The survivors gathered around the fire once more, exhausted but victorious. Zara sat beside Aiden, her hands still trembling from the adrenaline. "You saved us," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. Aiden shook his head. "We saved each other." Kara approached, her expression unreadable. For the first time since their encounter, she allowed a small smile to grace her lips. "You are a strange one, Aiden Cross, but I think we will survive. Thanks to you." Aiden gave a tired grin. "Survive, assess, adapt. It's what we do." As the fire crackled and the stars shimmered overhead, Aiden allowed himself a moment of peace. For the first time since arriving on this forsaken planet, he felt a glimmer of hope. They had faced the darkness and won, but the real battle was only just beginning. If they wanted to escape this planet, they would need more than just survival. They would need a plan. The morning sun rose over the jagged cliffs, casting long shadows across the battered camp. Aiden woke early, the weight of the previous night's encounter lingering in his mind. The beasts were dead, but the victory was hollow. This planet held more dangers than they could imagine. And with every day spent here, their odds of survival diminished. Kyra approached as Aiden tightened the straps on his survival suit. "What now?" she asked quietly, her voice carrying the exhaustion they all felt. Aiden squatted near a pile of salvaged metal and broken components, inspecting each piece. "We need a way off this rock," he replied, his tone resolute. "And if there's even a remote chance your ship's comms are still functional, we're going to find it." Zara, still wiping soot from her face, joined them. "The transmitter we used last night is too weak," she admitted. "But there might be more equipment near the wreckage." Aiden raised an eyebrow. "Near the wreckage? Why didn't you salvage it before?" Zara exchanged a look with Kyra. "We tried, but it's dangerous." She glanced toward the distant cliffs. "There are creatures in that area, worse than the ones we fought last night." Aiden exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Of course there are," he muttered under his breath. "But we don't have a choice. If we stay here much longer, we'll run out of food and water. We need to secure supplies and see if we can repair your comms." Kara crossed her arms, skeptical. "You want to fight your way through a nest of predators just to reach a broken transmitter?" Aiden met her gaze with unwavering determination. "I've fought worse for less. We need that equipment, Kyra. Otherwise, we're already dead." The group gathered near the edge of the camp, packing what little equipment they had. Kira insisted that only she, Aiden, and Zara attempt the mission. Traveling in a larger group would draw too much attention. The others remained behind to fortify the camp, preparing for the worst in case the team didn't return. They set out just after sunrise, following a narrow path that wound through the canyon. Aiden led the way, his senses on high alert. The landscape grew more treacherous as they approached the crash site. Sharp rocks jutted out at odd angles, and strange, luminous plants glowed faintly beneath the cracked soil. "It's not far now," Zara whispered, glancing nervously at the cliffs above them. Aiden nodded, but kept his eyes on the path ahead. The air felt thicker here, and a faint humming noise vibrated through the ground beneath his boots. It was unsettling, as if the planet itself was alive and watching them. Kyra stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Aiden froze, listening intently. At first, all he heard was the wind. But then a low, guttural growl reached his ears. He scanned the cliffs, his grip tightening on the makeshift spear slung across his back. Shadows moved among the rocks, large, hulking figures slinking through the crevices. "They're already here," Kira whispered. Aiden's heart pounded, but he forced himself to stay calm. "We keep moving," he said quietly. "Slow and quiet. If they attack, we hit fast and keep them off balance." Zara's breath hitched, but she nodded. "Got it." The trio continued toward the wreckage, every step measured and deliberate. The sound of claws scraping against rock grew louder, echoing ominously through the canyon. "There," Kira whispered, pointing toward a glint of metal half buried beneath a pile of rubble. The wreckage lay just ahead, a crumpled mass of twisted steel and shattered glass. Scattered among the debris were pieces of equipment that looked salvageable: power cells, data modules, and most importantly, the transmitter. Aiden approached the pile cautiously, scanning for any signs of movement. "Zara, see if you can get that transmitter working." Zara knelt beside the wreckage, her hands moving with practiced precision as she connected wires and calibrated the device. Kira stood guard, her eyes scanning the cliffs for any sign of movement. The growling grew louder. "Hurry," Kira hissed, her voice tense. Zara cursed under her breath. "The circuits are fried. I need a minute. Just a minute." Aiden gritted his teeth. "We don't have a minute." Suddenly, the shadows above them exploded into motion. 3 massive beasts, twice the size of the ones they had fought the night before, leaped down from the cliffs, snarling and snapping as they charged toward the group. Aiden reacted instantly. "Kyra, cover Zara. I'll draw them off." Without waiting for a response, Aiden sprinted toward the nearest beast, hurling his spear with deadly accuracy. The weapon struck true, piercing the creature's side and sending it into a frenzy. It roared in pain and lunged at Aiden, but he rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding its claws. Kira fired a makeshift energy weapon at the second beast, the blast searing through its thick hide. The creature stumbled, snarling in rage, but didn't stop. Meanwhile, Zara worked frantically, her fingers flying over the transmitter's controls. "Just a little more," she muttered under her breath. Aiden dodged another swipe from the first beast, adrenaline pumping through his veins. "Any time now, Zara." The third beast lunged toward Kyra, but Aiden tackled it midair, sending both of them crashing into the dirt. He scrambled to his feet, gasping for breath. The creature circled him, snarling and baring its fangs. "I've got it," Zara shouted triumphantly, holding up the transmitter. Aiden didn't hesitate. "Kyra, fall back. Zara, send the signal." Kyra fired another shot at the second beast, forcing it to retreat, and then sprinted toward Zara. Aiden backed away slowly, keeping the snarling creature at bay. The transmitter let out a high-pitched hum as Zara activated it, sending a pulse of energy rippling through the canyon. The creatures roared in pain, their sensitive ears overwhelmed by the sonic blast. Taking advantage of the distraction, Aiden and Kyra sprinted toward Zara. Together, the trio made a break for the canyon's entrance, the beasts howling in frustration behind them. They reached the safety of the camp just as the sun began to dip below the horizon. The others rushed to meet them, relief evident in their expressions. "Did it work?" Kira asked, breathing heavily. Zara grinned, holding up the transmitter. "The signal is live. If anyone's listening, they'll hear us." Aiden slumped against a rock, exhausted but satisfied. "Now we wait," he muttered, closing his eyes for a brief moment of rest. Kyra sat beside him, a rare smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "You humans really are something else." Aiden chuckled softly. "Told you." But even as they celebrated their small victory, Aiden knew their fight was far from over. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was still watching. and if rescue didn't come soon, they would need more than luck to survive. The following days passed in tense anticipation. The transmitter broadcasted its signal across the void, but there had been no response, no sign that anyone had heard their distress call. As they waited, Aiden and the team focused on fortifying the camp, knowing that another attack was inevitable. Despite their exhaustion, a new sense of camaraderie grew among the survivors. Kira and Aiden, though from different worlds, began to trust one another, united by the shared struggle for survival. Even Zara, usually reserved, opened up to Aiden, curious about his world and the human spirit that seemed unbreakable, no matter the odds. Still, unease gnawed at Aiden. Something about the silence from space didn't sit right. The Galactic Council was known for its ruthless efficiency. If they hadn't come back to retrieve him, it meant only one thing: they hadn't finished with him yet. Late one night, as the camp lay in uneasy quiet, Aiden sat at the edge of the perimeter, gazing up at the alien stars. His thoughts drifted to Earth, wondering if anyone back home knew what had happened to him. Was the Council already weaving lies about his disappearance, covering up their betrayal? Kira joined him, her steps silent as she sat beside him. "You're troubled," she observed. Aiden exhaled slowly. "It's too quiet out there. The Council isn't one to leave loose ends. If they haven't come for me yet, it's because they're waiting for something." Kira's expression darkened. "You think they'll come back?" "They will," Aiden said grimly. "They don't just abandon threats, they neutralize them." Kira looked away, her silver hair catching the moonlight. "We've been running for so long, it's hard to believe rescue will ever come." Aiden glanced at her, sensing the weight of her words. She's not just talking about this planet, he realized. The Council had cast her people aside, just as they had with him. They were all pawns in a game far bigger than themselves. "You're not alone in this," Aiden said quietly. "If they come for us, we'll be ready." Kira gave him a small, tired smile. "I hope you're right," Aiden cross. The following morning, as the camp prepared for another day of gathering supplies, the transmitter let out a sudden burst of static. Zara rushed to the device, adjusting the frequency. "We've got something," she called out. Aiden and Kira sprinted over, their hearts pounding with anticipation. For a moment, the signal was garbled, but then a voice broke through, harsh, mechanical, and unmistakably alien. "Galactic command to stranded vessel. Confirm identity and location." Kira's eyes widened, and Zara fumbled with the controls. "This is Zara of the crashed research team," she responded breathlessly. "We're stranded on a Class 3 planet with limited resources." Transmission acknowledged. The voice interrupted coldly. "Prepare for immediate retrieval." Aiden's stomach churned at the tone of the message. Something wasn't right. "Who's sending that signal?" he asked Zara urgently. Zara scanned the frequency, her hands shaking. It's the Council," she whispered. "They found us." Kira's face paled. "Why now? Why would they suddenly decide to rescue us after all this time?" Aiden's mind raced. "Because it isn't a rescue, it's a cleanup." "They're not coming to save us," Aiden said, his voice grim. "They're coming to make sure we don't leave." Within hours, a massive shadow appeared in the sky. A sleek black ship descending through the atmosphere with terrifying precision. The survivors gathered in the camp, weapons drawn, their hearts pounding as the Council's vessel hovered just above the ground. A ramp extended, and armored figures emerged, tall, imposing, and heavily armed. At their head was a Council officer, his cold, reptilian features masked behind a helmet. Kira stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "We are the research team, stranded here for many cycles. We request safe passage off this planet." The officer ignored her plea, his attention focused solely on Aiden. "Human Aiden Cross," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "By order of the Galactic Council, you are to be taken into custody." Aiden smirked. though his muscles tensed for the inevitable fight. "Guess you couldn't just leave me here to die." The officer's eyes narrowed. The council doesn't tolerate unfinished business. Before anyone could react, Aiden lunged forward, driving his shoulder into the officer's chest. The alien stumbled backward, caught off guard by the sudden attack. Kira and Zara moved in quickly, firing their makeshift weapons at the other soldiers. The camp erupted into chaos. Aiden fought with the precision of a seasoned soldier, disarming the nearest enemy and turning their weapon against them. Laser blasts lit up the night as the survivors fought desperately against the council's forces. Kira ducked under a barrage of fire, shouting orders to the others. "Hold the line. Don't let them take him." Zara scrambled to reconfigure the transmitter, her fingers flying over the controls. "If I can boost the signal, we might get a distress call out to other factions. Someone who can help us." Hayden fought his way through the chaos, dodging blasts and knocking out soldiers with brutal efficiency. But the council's forces were relentless, and the camp's defenses wouldn't hold much longer. "We need to fall back," Aiden shouted to Kira. "No," Kira shouted back, her eyes blazing with determination. "We stand and fight." Just as the battle seemed lost, the transmitter emitted a powerful pulse, strong enough to reach far beyond the planet's atmosphere. For a tense moment, everything went still, the council soldiers pausing as if waiting for orders. Then, to Aiden's astonishment, the communicator crackled to life again, this time with a new voice, one filled with authority and fury. "This is the independent fleet," the voice declared. "Stand down, council forces, or face immediate retaliation." The council officer stiffened, his eyes flickering with fear. "Impossible." Aiden grinned, the tide finally turning in their favor. "Looks like we're not so easy to get rid of after all." As the council forces retreated, the survivors watched in stunned relief. The independent fleet's signal had bought them precious time. But the fight wasn't over. They had sent a message to the galaxy. They were still alive, and they weren't going down without a fight. Kira stood beside Aiden, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "We survived," she whispered, as if daring to believe it. Aiden nodded, though he knew their journey was far from over. "Yeah," he said, staring up at the sky where the council ship had vanished. "But the real battle is just beginning." With the council forces retreating and the signal from the independent fleet resonating across the void, the survivors felt the first true sense of hope since they had been marooned on the planet. But Aiden knew better than to celebrate too soon. They had won a skirmish, not the war. Kira wiped blood from a gash on her arm, her jaw tight with determination. "The council will regroup," she said. "They won't stop until we're dead or captured." Aiden nodded, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "We need to be ready. If the independent fleet heard our signal, others did too. We have a small window to prepare before the council returns." Zara glanced up from the transmitter, her hand still hovering over the controls. "The fleet might be our only shot at survival, if they show up in time." "They will," Aiden said firmly. "But we need more than hope. We need leverage." Kira gave him a sharp look. "What do you have in mind?" Aiden's gaze drifted toward the twisted remains of the council's attack. "They left behind more than just weapons. They left us an opportunity." For the next few hours, Aiden, Kira, and Zara scoured the battlefield, gathering equipment and stripping the fallen council soldiers of their advanced tech. With ingenuity born from desperation, Zara began hacking into the soldiers' communication systems, hoping to glean useful intelligence. Kira approached Aiden with a somber expression. "The others are scared. They fought well, but they aren't soldiers, Aiden. If the council returns in full force, we won't last." Aiden set down the rifle he'd scavenged and met her gaze. "Then we make sure they never get the chance." Kira frowned. "What do you mean?" Aiden smirked, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "We're going to give the council a reason to stay far away from us. and anyone else who crosses us. With Sarah's expertise, they managed to reconfigure the stolen communications equipment into a signal jammer, rendering the Council's long-range systems useless. Any reinforcements the Council might send would arrive blind, and by then, Aiden planned to be long gone. As the sun began to set, Kara and the others worked tirelessly to fortify the camp. Using debris from the wreckage and salvaged weapons, they built a network of traps and defenses that turned their camp into a fortress. "If the Council comes back," Kira muttered, hammering a metal spike into the ground, "they'll wish they hadn't." Aiden grinned, admiring their handiwork. "Now you're thinking like a human." Zara's voice crackled over the makeshift comms. "Signal from the fleet. They're closing in on our location. We need to hold out just a little longer." Aiden's expression hardened. "Good. Let's give them a reason to remember us." As the night deepened, the air grew still, heavy with anticipation. Aiden stood at the front of the camp, watching the horizon for any sign of movement. He knew the Council wouldn't give up so easily. They would return, desperate to eliminate any witnesses and reclaim their dominance. Sure enough, the silence was soon shattered by the low hum of engines. A sleek Council ship appeared on the horizon, its silhouette dark against the stars. Moments later, more ships followed, an entire assault force sent to finish what the Council had started. Aiden glanced at Kyra and the others. "Here they come." Kyra's eyes narrowed, her grip tightening on the makeshift rifle in her hands. "We hold them off, no matter what." The Council forces descended in waves, deploying troops and drones into the canyon. But Aiden was ready. He triggered the first trap, a series of mines hidden beneath the dirt. The explosion rocked the ground, sending debris and soldiers flying into the air. The Council drones swarmed in next, but Zara's jamming signal scrambled their sensors, causing them to crash into the canyon walls. Kira and the others picked off the remaining soldiers with precise shots, each blast fueled by the fierce determination to survive. Aiden fought at the front lines, his every movement precise and calculated. He was a soldier to the core, and tonight, he was fighting not just for survival, but for freedom, for himself and for those who had been abandoned by the Council's cruelty. The battle raged on, but the tide began to turn. Just when it seemed like the Council forces might overwhelm them, a new fleet appeared on the horizon. The Independent Fleet had arrived. Massive ships descended from the sky, firing upon the Council's forces with devastating precision. The Council soldiers scrambled in retreat, their once dominant force reduced to chaos. Within moments, the battlefield was silent once more, save for the hum of the fleet's engines overhead. Aiden lowered his weapon, breathing heavily as the last Council ship disappeared into the night. They had done it. They had survived. A sleek vessel from the fleet landed near the camp, and a tall figure stepped out, an officer clad in a black uniform, his expression stern but respectful. "We received your distress call," he said. "You fought well." Aiden nodded. "We did what we had to." The officer's gaze drifted to the makeshift camp, then to Kyra and the others. "The Council won't forget this, you know. They'll come for you again." Aiden smirked, his eyes cold and determined. "Let them. We'll be ready." The officer gave a small nod, then extended a hand. "We can offer you a place among us. Freedom from the Council's reach. But you'll have to leave this planet behind." Kyra looked at Aiden, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "What do we do now?" Aiden didn't hesitate. "We go with them, together." As the survivors boarded the fleet's ship, Aiden glanced back at the desolate planet one last time. It had been a place of exile and danger, but also one of unexpected alliances and newfound hope. They had fought the darkness, and won. The ramp closed behind them, and the ship lifted off, leaving the barren landscape behind. Aiden leaned back in his seat, exhaustion finally catching up to him. Kara sat beside him, her expression thoughtful. Do you think we'll ever be free from them, from the Council? Aiden shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. Freedom isn't given, it's fought for, and we've only just begun.